Some languages live in your mouth, and others live in your heart. Kyrgyz, my first language, lived in my ears, but almost never on my tongue. I was born in Kyrgyzstan, a country nestled between mountains and memory, and I grew up hearing Kyrgyz all around me, in songs, in old women's stories shared over tea, in laughter of children playing in a courtyard, and I loved the way it moved. It was gentle, musical, and full of softness. But I rarely spoke it, because at home, at school, and nearly in every place of my life, Russian was the language that I used. Russian was the language of logic, of structure, of getting things done. And after that came English, but not by accident, but by hunger, the hunger to grow, to dream, and to explore. And eventually, English became the language of ambition, reinvention, and mobility. And after that came French, very elegant and elusive. And after that came Chinese, which felt like a great romance for quite a long time. And currently, I've immersed myself into Hungarian culture and language as well for 3 years. And today, I stand in a space between many languages, a space where fluency does not mean ownership, and where understanding does not mean belonging. But I'm not here to give a talk about how many languages I speak. I'm here to tell you what it feels like to live between them and to live inside them, to speak fluently, but to never feel native. I remember a night in Budapest when this feeling, the ache of in-betweenness, hit me with unexpected force. I was in tram, it was late, I was lost in haze of thoughts and city lights. And suddenly, a Kyrgyz lullaby started playing in my head. One that I hadn't heard in years. The one that your mother usually hums while folding laundry, while she is doing something, not even realizing that she is singing. And it wasn't planned, it just appeared, like memory often does, uninvited and powerful. A few seconds in, something in me tightened. My throat, my chest, my memory. I understood that I could not sing it, not without stumbling, not confidently. And at that moment, I realized that something was really wrong. A feeling that something sacred slipped away while I wasn't watching. At that moment, I thought, okay, I am multilingual on a paper. But at that tram ride made me feel like a stranger to all of them. Not Kyrgyz enough, not Russian enough, never quite English, and I might pause here. But what I've come to understand as well is that this feeling of in-betweenness is not a deficit, but it's a quiet superpower. And what I've come to understand later is that some of us speak a language fluently, but feel distant from its soul. And some of us carry a mother tongue that we never mastered and still feel guilty about it. Some learned a new language through love, others through necessity, and others through dreams that didn't come true. And their entire lives lived in translation. And when you live in between, you're always reaching not only for the right word, but for the right version of yourself. You become someone who listens differently. You pay attention to tone, to silence, to nuance, and when you grow, you also understand this, that in this silence you learn something about empathy. It's not always easy, and it might feel like an exile, but you feel like a guest in every language that you speak. But slowly I understand, and I began to understand this too, that this feeling of non-belonging is not a deficit, but it's also a quiet superpower. And linguists and neuroscientists are starting to understand this too. At the Max Planck Institute of Psycholinguistics, researchers have discovered that language identity rarely comes with proficiency. That means that you can speak a language flawlessly and still feel like it's not yours. And at the same time, you can feel a profound emotional ties to a language that you can barely speak. Aneta Pavlenko, a leading voice in multilingual identity, refers to it as an emotional weight of a language. She found that people experience different kinds of emotions based on the language that they are speaking. A swear word in your third language might seem harmless and even funny, but in your native tongue or mother tongue, it burns and it cuts. Different languages activate different parts of our brain. Dr. Arturo Hernandez, a neuroscientist at the University of Houston, showed that our brains literally light up differently depending on the language that we are using. That means that we can think and even feel differently depending on the words that we use to describe the world. Thus, language is not just a tool, but it's also a mirror and it's also a filter. And what we can also say is that language is something untranslatable and unsayable. And maybe you've never studied another language, or maybe you collect them like passport stamps, but we all know this feeling of in-betweenness, in between jobs, in between cities, in between who we were last year and who we are trying to become right now. Language just gives you the sound of a soundtrack and this feeling of a soundtrack. The moment when you switch the tongue, something new shifts. Your posture changes, your voice changes, and even your personality changes. Because let's be honest, some of us are just funnier in one language than in another. And we can also say that some jokes are just, or some feelings are landing perfectly in one language, but in another, they might feel like a really bad Google translated poem. So language is not just about vocabulary, it's also about the permission and the access. It's about who gets to speak and who gets spoken over. So we can say that language is also about the loss, but not Oscar-winning loss. I mean, it's the loss where you cannot translate the joke that you know is funny, or the loss when you cannot remember how your grandmother used to call you and say, "Come and eat," when you were a child. But in all the spaces between them, you're learning something and you're building your own voice. Not just in one language, as I mentioned, but in all the spaces between them. So what does it actually mean to live fluently but never natively? And let me show you. A woman from my working space, originally from Kyrgyzstan, but she works in a German office with English-speaking people. She deals with clients in English every single day. She leads meetings, she mediates misunderstandings, and she also translates not just words, but worldviews. She's not native in any of those languages, and still she gets to master all of them. So this is what I mean by living fluently without being native. So at this time, I get to think about shifting our perspective and our framework from the fixed categories to the evolving tools. So these are the shifts that I suggest implement. The first one is to shift from ownership to access. We don't have to ask ourselves or to say that we own the language. We have to say or to use a language or perceive a language as a shared tool, like an air or a code. The second one, we should shift our perspective from proficiency to function. Instead of asking, how well do you speak? We have to ask, can you really express what matters? And what really counts is clarity, empathy, and emotions, not accents or idioms. And the third one, very important, is that we have to shift our perspective from belonging to navigation. Instead of asking, where do I belong? People should ask, where can I navigate now? Because fluency across cultures builds a rare kind of intelligence, that intelligence that connects and adapts. In short, living between languages is not a flaw. It's a kind of fluency a world needs to value. And if TEDx is about ideas worth spreading, here's one. Fluency without nativeness is not a failure, but this is one of the most overlooked superpowers of our time. And let's start treating it like one. Thank you.